I'm Katie.
I'm Anna.
She's a psychotherapist.
And she runs a photography empire. Together we make music and we podcast
to encourage ourselves
and you
to do the things that scare us most. Let's jump in. Let's talk about the messy middle.
It's messy and it's the middle. What's in the middle of? Everything.
Life.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to do a check-in about what our messy middle looks like, because we're very big advocates that, what you see on social media and what most people portray themselves as isn't the whole story, at least.
Totally.
It can be honest, but that doesn't mean that, they got there easily. And so we are a few months into this podcast thing.
Yeah. This is us walking the talk.
Yeah, talking the walk.
All of it. I mean, if you ever feel like you're alone doing your scary thing, just know that you're definitely not alone. If because of nobody else, certainly because of us, because we really are doing it.
Yeah.
And you're probably in the messy middle too. And so are we. So
yeah, and the messy middle can look really good and really exciting on some days.
Mm-hmm.
And then some days I think it can feel very lonely. And I think it's probably pretty common to wonder why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And if you should continue. And we just wanted to talk about all that today.
Yeah. And just to preface, if I may, this is not a day in the middle for us that's really strongly one or the other. Like, it's not a super awesome day and it's not a super hopeless day. Yeah. It's kind of a middle kind of day. So that's why we wanted to talk about it, because there's really hopeful and defeating and everything is all mixed together. And this day doesn't have a predominant feeling about it. So it's a good time to be able to lay all of it out there and acknowledge all of it, because it's all there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, to me, this has felt like a really good day because we got a lot accomplished off our to-do list. But yeah, it's like the least glamorous thing it could be.
Yeah.
It was literally like the first time in probably a couple months that we've actually had time to sit down together and mark things off, other than just okay, we have to do this immediately.
Right.
Or we won't have a podcast to post this week.
Right. We've been running on what's not the bare minimum, but I guess just the necessities to keep putting out episodes for the last couple of months, because life has been really bananas. Yeah. And of course there's ebb and flow with that, but there really has just been so much stuff going on, some of it expected, some of it not expected, and we've had to prioritize differently now than we have at other times. And so it's just we have to just keep on recalculating as we go, basically.
Yeah. And I think that's okay. It never feels great to be in those situations where you're like, okay, I have this much time, so what's the one thing I have to do? And then I'll sort of, put everything on the back burner. That doesn't feel super great or fun to me. But I think it's okay, and it is required sometimes. And then there will be times, and we've had this too, where, it's like, okay, we're this much ahead, or we're going to, do all of this today just to get ahead. And, and that feels great also.
Yeah, it totally does. I think just having even if it's more of a mental, not illusion, but sort of a mental thing, to feel like you have enough space and you're not just like you said, you're not just picking one most important thing and then throwing everything else on the back burner until you have time to pick the next most important thing. Whatever that is, to me, that feels a lot like, my mental bandwidth, or my time, or space, or whatever. So it's really good. I feel like we're about to break through and have another little season of where we have plenty of space, not excessive space where we're bored or we're, just lazy or unproductive or whatever. I don't think you or I are capable of being lazy or unproductive, frankly. But I do think that we both need to have at least those periods of time where there's respite built in and there's space built in. And so, yeah, we're like trying to get ahead of the game with all the stuff that we're doing, and we're also trying to slow down at the same time.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, no, I don't think either of us have long periods of times where we're super unproductive. But one thing that I have definitely been trying to learn and practice in the last few years is rest, and how important that actually is, and that that's not a thing to take for granted or to not make time for.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about all the people out there that I know are just super overwhelmed, just trying to stay afloat, doing the day job, going home and spending time with their kids every second they have, and investing in their marriage. And then it's like, okay, now when do I actually have time to do something just for me, or pursue a passion, or what have you? So yeah, I was just thinking about all of that. And just to be transparent with us, so much of what we've shared has been about making time to write music together. And then we went on this journey where we did record those songs, and now we're slowly, very slowly, sometimes releasing those songs. And it just all feels like such a long time coming. And then at the same time, it's like, we've been so busy lately with the podcast and with life and with our other jobs that it's been a long time since we've been able to continue that practice and write songs. And, I just wanted to be really honest about that, like you said, we're getting ready to come back to a place of kind of being ahead, quote unquote. And what that looks like for us is, okay, now we can be back to our normal of like, now we can write songs again,
Right. It's making space for that and for resting. And I'm really glad you mentioned that, because what I found for myself is that resting takes an active effort on my part. Like, I cannot just passively like stumble into resting. I have to like actively choose to rest. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way it happens. Like, the only way. Sure. So I just love that you mentioned that, because there may be periods of quote unquote like inactivity or experiences you might be tempted to label as unproductive. And I just want to like clear something up about that. Rest is productive. Yeah. And it's necessary, and it's super beneficial. So if anybody out there has trouble resting and hasn't thought of it that way, I just wanted to say it that way, because it took me many years and many different iterations of that being like thrown at me before I finally like got it to sink into my brain. So it's really important. The other thing about, if you're not used to resting, it will definitely feel super foreign and really weird at first. I remember it being pretty much painful, because you're so uber aware in those moments of all the things that are still on your to-do list and that you need to be doing. And it's so hard to make yourself and that rest time a priority. But it is so crucial, and it really has made a big difference in my life. Yeah. And if you can rest near an ocean, more power to you. Please invite us. There may or may not be a whole song about that being released really soon. Yeah. Well, not really about that, but more like as a product of that. Yes. We do write songs by the ocean. We do. It's the best. Well, just to recap our own story, since that's what we do here. Yeah. So it has been a little over a year since we finished recording those 6 songs. I can't believe that. It's crazy. Yeah. How fast time is flying. What's crazier is some of these songs were written like over 3 years ago. Yeah. So that feels really crazy, because in all the moments where we feel like we're doing a million things and we don't have time for all of this like extra stuff we want to do, like promotion and everything else, it's so crazy to look back and be like, well, it's been 3 years, so let's just do something. I know. And like, on the other hand, sort of a different angle of that is, if you told me now, well, 3 years from now, you'll be releasing this song that you finally like put to the paper, I might roll my eyes at that if I hadn't had this experience and be like, wow, 3 years might as well be like an eternity. But you know what? On this side of it, I'm so glad we wrote those 3 years ago. I'm so glad that we did everything we did, even though it took years. It was completely worth it.
Oh, totally worth it. To echo what you're saying, like, I think 3 years ago, I wouldn't have believed it.
Right.
3 years would have seemed like such a short amount of time, to be like, oh yeah, you're going to have a podcast and all of that. And I'm like, what? Like, no, I haven't even told anybody I write songs,
Nice segue into how there are still people who are close friends and people in our world, like in our kind of our sphere of influence, who have no idea that we're doing any of this still.
I know.
We run into them weekly, it seems.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention that because I do think it's kind of interesting and funny because, we are doing everything we can to post about this stuff on social media. We feel annoying about posting.
Yeah.
We're talking about it with people in our real lives, and then we're doing podcasts about it. Like, I don't know how else to tell everybody I'm doing it.
Yeah.
But,
it's been a year. Like,
it's been a long time.
It's been at least a year since we've started opening our mouths and talking about it, you know?
Yeah, totally. And I still meet people I'll run into people and they still associate me with the job that they knew I had like 10 years ago. And it's like, I don't understand how we can be so busy and have such a like limited idea in our minds that like that wouldn't be noticeable. I don't know. And I hope that doesn't sound self-centered. I really did want to bring that up as an encouragement to people that if you feel like nobody is seeing you, like you're not alone. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Because to a certain extent, I think that's just the world we live in. And sometimes you do have to bang people over the head with it. And they may still be like, oh, what are you talking about? I don't know.
Yeah. From our experience so far, I feel like our best bet is to just keep being consistent and keep existing because eventually, like, they may realize it and we'll be there to greet them with open arms when they do.
Well, and to be fair, like, it took me a really long time before I was able to kind of talk about it. And, I'm the queen, I feel like, of social media, like, vagueness. and at first, that was sort of a self-protection thing. And now I'm ready to talk about it. I'm ready to be okay with it. But it just took me a while to get there. And so I think that's okay too. If you have a hard time, we talked about that on Meg Kissak's episode. You don't have to share everything with everybody. And if you don't feel valued in a certain situation or seen or acknowledged, that's okay. Like, you just have to know that what you're doing is allowed and it is valuable and just keep going.
Totally. I love that. I love Meg's episode too. If you haven't heard it, go listen. It's amazing. And also, I just want to point out that you're also the queen of email. So
what does that mean for people who don't know?
It means if you're me and you sit down to write an email and your mind goes blank, all you have to do is like slightly cut your eyes to the right where Katie's sitting and she's like, you want me to write it? And I'm like, yes, please write it. She's so good. She can write really good emails about literally anything in her sleep. I don't know
and
how
hopefully
she does
good
it.
Books too, but that remains to be seen.
I mean, I have already read it, and I think it's even better than your emails.
But when you put the mic in front of me, I just start talking really slowly because I'm trying to edit in my brain before the words come out.
As you go.
Anyway, we did want to say, though, that even as like strange and mysterious as this path has kind of been, we didn't know, we still don't know, like, what are the stats we should be looking for in our podcast and all of those things. Like, people will ask us, how's the podcast going? And we're like, good, I think. Like, we're still doing it. We haven't missed a week yet, you know. How's it going for you? I don't know. But we just wanted to mention, like, we think, and it's going really well, and we've been super encouraged from the feedback we've gotten. And so thank you to all of you.
Yeah, and we're having a blast, and we're super excited anytime we get to hear about your scary things. And it just makes it feel more like, oh, it's a community, not an audience. And,
yes,
maybe on some level, someday we'll want an audience for our music. I feel like the podcast especially, we're not after an audience. We want a community. And I mean, I think we want that with our music too, but it's like, it's kind of more like normal to just be a fan of music,
I guess so, yeah.
But
that's a good point. But yeah, I mean, every time somebody has reached out and just said that they've liked an episode or whatever, like, I think it's a compliment, but more than that, it's so encouraging that this is resonating with other people. Because we're here doing our scary thing regardless. And so just like you may be encouraged to know you're not alone, we feel the same way.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, our primary scary thing is advancing in this world with our music, and the podcast has come alongside of that. I know when we first launched both things at the same time, it felt like we had twins, I
think that was a bad idea. In hindsight.
Listen, it's okay to make mistakes.
But we did it.
Yeah.
So we kept going.
And like the podcast is its own thing, but at the same time, it's connected and somewhat in service of our scary thing, which is our music. And so it's really nice to know that the podcast, which in some ways is just not like the primary thing, quote unquote. So we've been putting in a lot of time and effort and energy into the podcast. Sometimes at the expense of time and energy we would be putting into music, but we feel like it's so vital to do this part of it, So it's really nice to know that this part of it that is sometimes resource heavy for us is worth it and makes a difference to other people, I mean, I think we said at the beginning, like, at least among ourselves, like, we would do this podcast even if nobody listened because it's keeping us accountable and it's reaffirming, what we believe about this process and the value of doing our scary thing. But actually, it's really nice to know that it does matter to other people and it helps them,
Yeah, that's been super encouraging. And we've gotten to talk with just really cool people.
Yes.
Most of them are friends who are, out there doing scary things too. I really can't emphasize enough how much I love that the message is so inclusive. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be a music lover. You don't have to want to do anything artistic even to have a dream that's scary to you.
Yeah.
Like, everybody has those things. And so I have just loved picking people's brains about how they tick and how they've pushed past fear and kept themselves going.
Totally. Everybody has their own unique, hilarious sense of humor. And like, we're not setting out to be comedians on here. It's just so funny. People are so real. And so it's a form of intimacy. They're so intimate with us and joking around about this stuff that's actually like the most important, like, lifeblood of how you're spending your time on earth. It's really cool.
Yeah. I also just want to tell all the listeners and just say this out loud. I think almost every single one of our guests, when we have asked them if they would be a guest, we get the same response almost every time.
Yes.
And that is that they don't feel like they're qualified.
And guess what?
They are.
They totally are. They're amazing.
And we're like, that's why we picked you. Because like we've said, we're not interested in people who think they've got it all figured out, because we know for a fact they don't.
Yeah.
And that's not a cut on anybody specific. It's just something I believe very strongly.
Yeah. Well, there's something that feels mutually exclusive about that. If you think you have it all together and you act like you do, you're probably on cruise control. Mm-hmm. And we're like not interested in talking to people on cruise control because that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, let alone if you did something and were successful at it, it's not going to look the same for me. It's not. We're not doing it at the same time. We're not doing it the same way. It's not going to happen the same way. And you have to leave space for that or you're going to be sorely disappointed. So I love that our guests don't feel qualified, that they are in the messy middle, just like we are, just like you are, probably.
That's probably why they're so prone to joking around, because they're like a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I've noticed I have a lot of nervous laughter. I'm working on that. So yeah, I just love that, most of our guests have not felt qualified. And yeah, we have learned so much from them and from our conversations. And so I think that's just, exactly the point we're trying to get across. What can we learn from each other? Don't discount the story of the person next to you just because you don't see them with 1 million social media followers. Don't discount them because you don't see them on a stage or on a large platform. I think everybody has something they can share.
Well, and, bringing it back full circle to like our topic today, don't discount yourself if you don't have 1 million followers.
Yes,
don't discount yourself if you don't have a huge platform. Don't discount yourself if you never have a huge platform.
Yeah, that's not the goal.
No. So I just think that's really cool. And I totally agree with you. I love that that's everyone's response. We obviously have some humble, amazing guests, but also they have taught us so much and they're so inspiring. So I feel like that's been a huge part of our kind of stamina through all of this weirdness, which we can talk about some of that too. This year has been super weird so far and has made it really hard for us to just keep going at some points. Not that I don't think we've ever felt like, oh, we want to give up. It's just like a lot of stuff's been going on. And so it's been really demanding and it's just resistance. It's harder to keep forging ahead in light of all this other stuff, such as I had like a really horrible, tragic death in my family in January, which required me to be out of the state for weeks, like so many weeks, like over a month of time I was out of the state of Georgia. So, we couldn't do new episodes while I was gone. And obviously I was hyper focused on like that situation and what was going on. And as I should be, but all the normal workflow of things to produce the podcast and to think about writing music and continuing all these things we've fought hard for got really disrupted. I'm not complaining and whining about that. It was a totally reasonable, rightful disruption. Of course, when something like that happens, you drop everything and that's just how it is. But there was like a very real impact on our flow and our projects, so the aftershocks of that, not even the emotional ones, but just the functional ones are that now we're having to play a lot of catch up and we're having to restructure things to keep our year like moving along. So there's a lot of just behind the scenes, that kind of stuff that we've had to do. But there's like a whole existential side of this where when someone dies, especially someone you love so much dies, it makes you like look at your whole life, like it makes you take inventory and consider your own mortality. And I have so much gratitude for doing these things, especially sort of in light of that, even though I wasn't at that time able to like work on anything or create any new music, I just thought, wow, I'm really glad that I'm spending my life this way, because you never know how short it's going to be, honestly. Yeah. And not to mention, the person who I lost was one of my biggest, most amazing lifelong supporters and encouragers of everything that I ever did, and especially of my music. So it was just really eye-opening to think about all of that stuff. Also, in a more practical sense, I think it really forced both of us really to become really efficient and streamline our approach, to all the behind the scenes stuff so that we could still put out an episode every week and that we could actually have a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of songwriting together again. And so I'm really grateful for that. I think that it was a little bit of a pressure cooker, but we're coming out the end of the tunnel now. So it's good.
That's so true. And it's kind of like that saying that when you watch someone die, they're actually showing you how to live. Mm-hmm. I've thought about that a lot recently. It's one of our biggest motivators for what we're doing and what we're encouraging people to do is to realize that we do have a limited time on this earth. That's what all signs point to, right? I mean, nobody's getting out of here alive. And can
that be the episode title?
Sure. You can work so hard at something and it not be something that brings you joy. You know, if we can do one thing with this podcast, I think it's to encourage people to think about that. Picture yourself in 20, 30, 40, 50 years where you expect to be, what you expect that life to be like, and look back on your life and think, what did I actually do with it? Mm-hmm. And how did that make me feel? Like, am I proud of that? You know? And you're the only person on this earth that can answer that question, honestly.
Yeah.
And so I really just encourage everybody to really think about that really honestly. And, you know, whatever changes you have to make, no matter how far down the road you think it might take you to get there, I just encourage you to start as soon as you can. And yeah, that's what we're talking about. Being in this messy middle, every day is not exciting. There is the resistance piece. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
As soon as you start something and you think, you know, things are going pretty well, you are probably going to be pushed backwards. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
You've got to figure out what you're made of. You got to figure out how to keep going. And if you get pushed backwards, that's your new starting point.
Yeah, and I think it helps a lot to just expect that it's going to happen, you know? But the beautiful thing is, it's kind of like when you have a cold, you know, and you're like,
who, me?
Who, Katie? When someone who shall remain nameless has a cold, or a hypothetical you has a cold, and you're just miserable, you know? And then, like, you get rid of your cold and you're like, oh, I'm so glad I can breathe through my nose again. It's just like the biggest blessing ever in your life when you can finally breathe through both nostrils. You know, like there's such a deeper appreciation for it after you've had a cold.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's how this is. And like, I love those moments. Like when you come out of the tunnel, you could see the light at the end, but you actually do get to come out the other side at some point. And like, you're probably going to go through another tunnel, but there's really a moment of like joy and gratitude that you can relish when you push through that stuff. Like, it's not going to take you down, you know? Like, you can move through it and see the other side, and it's a beautiful place to be on the other side of that. Mm-hmm. So it's worth the pushing through, you know?
Yeah.
It really is. And even when it's more innocuous, like it's not, like right now, this is not an especially challenging moment per se. It's kind of a mid-grade, you know, messy middle kind of a day, but it's still worth the perseverance, you know? It still requires perseverance, honestly.
It does. And I think I just can't say enough about how important mindset is, because I just think it's all about perspective. You know, we could look at this day and we could say, oh my gosh, that music blog rejected our song. We should quit, you know,
it must suck.
Yeah. Or we could say, you know, oh, so-and-so had to cancel the interview. Like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so discouraged. I don't know. We could say so many things to frame it in a way that while it's true to some point, it's not the whole story.
Right.
Or we could say, you know what, we've still got a really long way to go, but we're going and we're working on it. And when I look back to before we started and just how impossible any of this seemed, like really, frankly, even just possible to have like 5 minutes in my day to work on something for myself.
Right.
When I think about being in that place versus where we are now, like there's not an award or an accolade that is more important, because we fought for our time and we got it. And we're doing things that bring us joy.
Totally. And we fought for our recent release of our single. Like nobody's business in the middle of all this madness.
That's true.
We even had resistance over there. You know, a process we'd already done 3 times without any hiccups at all.
Yeah. So the single we released a while back, Daydream Masterpiece, the distributor came to us really last minute, like totally dropped the ball, but there was a problem with the artwork, and it was right in the middle of Anna being out of state and, you know, sitting in ICU, sleeping in ICU. And that's normally something that she kind of handles. And I just remember being like, I can't do this by myself. I can't figure this out. And we just put everything on hold. And it was, you know, it was fine. When we came back to it, it was fine. And so sometimes maybe things don't happen on your timeline, but they'll happen eventually if you keep working at it.
Right. And like, we didn't by any means quit. It was disheartening to have to postpone it, but that was our best option at that point. Yeah. And sometimes you just gotta, and it's okay. Like, I don't feel like either one of us got too hung up on it. We were just like, well, that is what it is. And
yeah,
we'll keep going and eventually it'll get released. And now it is. So
yeah,
there you go.
Yep.
Love it.
So the moral of the story is go listen to our songs on Spotify.
Yeah.
Have we said that yet?
Yeah, please do. Also, go listen to our Spotify playlist.
Yes. We haven't talked about that yet on here.
No, I don't think so.
So we created a playlist called
Friends and Faves.
So cute. Friends and Faves. And it's our friends' music, it's our music, and it's some of our favorite music from our whole entire life that has been a big influence on us.
Yeah, it's great. And we're excited to keep adding more to it. But it's like there. It's already there. There's a bunch of really great music on there. You might be surprised at the variety.
Yeah. Our music may make a lot more sense once you listen to it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or once you see the variety.
Yeah.
Bonus points for who can guess which of us added which song.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That would be really fun.
Yeah. I'm going to put that on Instagram.
What's some other like positive stuff that's happened during all of this messy middle lately? I guess 2019 so far.
2019. Well, here's another example of not being on the schedule you may have thought. So my plan was to get my book pitch finished in November.
Yeah, girl.
And pitch it first thing in January. And for those of you who don't know, if you're trying to get a book published by a well-known publisher who's going to give you, distribution and bookstores and things like that, you basically, it's kind of this unspoken rule. You're not really allowed to approach publishers yourself. So you basically have to pitch your book to literary agents and get people to kind of believe in you. And then they are the go-between and they have the connections with the publishers. And so all of this is super foreign to me. Didn't know anything about this. So yeah, that was my plan. I was going to have it ready out of the gate first thing in January. Well, guess what? It is March. It's probably April or May when you're listening to this. And I am just now this week getting ready to pitch for the first time.
To an agent.
And, it's something that I think sort of internally I have beat myself up over a little bit, just knowing that I was behind on my own timeline. And there again, it's just one of those things you have to remind yourself, like, that wasn't a timeline anybody else gave to me. Like, right. I just pulled that out of thin air and it's fine. Like, you just adjust and go for it. So that's where I am. And it's taken longer to get here than I thought. And that's okay.
Yeah, totally. Again, it's like stuff comes up and changes your timelines. And for me, with the loss of my family member and everything, like, that was a very clear, like, okay, this thing showed up in life and everything else just got displaced and that's just how it is. And you just got to pick up and keep going when you can. That magnitude of something in your life, or in my life anyway, just displaced everything. It displaced weeks and weeks of therapy sessions with my clients, in which every one of them was a champion about. And I super appreciate it. And, it displaced my own personal, like, creative stuff, writing songs. And I even just completely quit journaling during all of that, which is something I was actually finally doing consistently.
Oh, no.
I know. I started again today, finally. But yay. Amanda Wilkinson and I, she was one of our previous podcast guests, have written a play and we're about to submit it to a competition. And I think that's all I can say about it. But we have had, deadlines associated with that have also kind of snuck up in the middle of all this. And so, I don't know, a little bit like when it rains, it pours, but it's just kind of like when something interrupts, like it interrupts across the board.
Yeah.
And that's very much been my experience. But I don't know if it's good or if it's a good sign. I feel like you and I and our projects that we work on together, like this podcast and our music, we both do kind of have that groundedness about it, that we're like, you know what, it's okay. We always have known, it's just a given with us that it can be flexible, like if it needs to be, just about the only thing that we're not flexible for is just if we're scared. We're like, that's not a reason, you know?
Totally.
It is a reason, but it's not a reason to hold back or to postpone indefinitely or whatever. So anything else is pretty workable. And there's really like so much peace that comes with that, you know? There's so much peace that comes with knowing that things can change, and like change is not inherently bad. We're very much wired to feel like it is bad, or that it's threatening, or that it's wasting time, or it's ruining something. Try not to have that mindset about change. Try not to have that lens. It doesn't have to be bad. Sometimes the best, most serendipitous things happen because stuff changed that was out of your control.
Yeah, totally. Like, think of it this way. Who works better with a deadline? I know I do, you know, and sometimes maybe having a little bit of pressure on you is a good thing, you know? Like, I was just thinking while you were talking, like, yes, of course, like, we're going to have to shift things around and, you know, change our priorities from time to time. Like, we're not children, you know, like, we are adults, we have multiple businesses. And just the fact that, you know, we're not sort of following that philosophy of put your head down and do one job, you know, just that feels rebellious on some days.
Right.
You know, when you are 18 and when you are 20 or, you know, whatever, and you may have a really clear vision of where you want to go, but what you don't have is experience. And what you don't have is the wherewithal to know that you can juggle a bunch of different stuff and come out okay. So yeah, we're here for it.
Yeah, I love that we've learned somehow to be dynamic and to run our lives in a dynamic way, because life is dynamic, you know? And like what you're just saying, just sort of keep your really rigorous routine and like work one job for 50 years that's at the same place and just put your head down and do it. Like, that sounds safe and tidy, you know, in a way, but it doesn't fit well with life and the nature of life. It feels like, you know, a square peg in a round hole kind of thing.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that, you know, you use the word dynamic, and I completely agree. I would also use the words, I know everyone's shocked, I would also use the word creativity.
Hey!
We are problem solvers. If we get to do anything in this life, we get to create the life that we want. We're creators by nature. Let's just connect to that, own it as a piece of our identity, and just decide what we want to pursue.
Yeah. And every creative process has a messy middle.
And we're here for it.
Here we are. Right in it.
Until next time.
Signing off, doing some scary, scary things.
Peace out.
The middle. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have a second, head over to Spotify to listen to our brand new playlist called Friends and Faves. Check out our show notes for that and other helpful info. See you next week. Well, anyway, she's finally finished. Just kidding.